right, what is going on with my cam fam? It is so exciting to actually be back in community with you. I hope that you are well in your spirit. Welcome to Brave Voices in Education, the podcast where boldness meets brilliance and healing meets hustle. I'm Craig Aarons Martin, your host, educator, advocate, and believer in the stories that are sacred for change. Listen, today's episode is for anyone who's ever felt like they have had to carry it all to be strong for everyone else. But inside, you're wondering, who's carrying me? And so that feeling, it can feel like it's a barrier. It can actually isolate us. It can wear us down. But today, we're going to break through that together because braving isn't about being invincible. It's about being real, even when the world wants you to be bulletproof. And to help us break that barrier and actually just break through to all things wonderful and amazing, and also calling us in nicely to talk about power or more, I'm excited about my wonderful, I call her a friend and a mentor. Some leaders talk about change. Others live it, they breathe it, and they bring it with them everywhere they go. Dr. Tanji Marshall-Reed is one of those rare souls. As an accomplished educator, leadership coach, author, and partner at Liaison Educational Partners, Tanji has spent her career doing one thing brilliantly: building leaders who build systems that actually serve all students. Her journey stretches across classrooms, school leadership offices, central offices, and now the national stage. Yet through it all, she stayed grounded in radical love for young people and uncompromising excellence for the adults who serve them. Whether coaching superintendents or mentoring emerging principals, Dr. Reed Marshall reminds us that leadership isn't about ego, it's about impact. She's a dynamic speaker, a system strategist, and a fierce advocate for equity who makes everybody in the room stand a little taller and dream a little bigger. And through it all, she leads with humor, grace, and an unwavering belief in what's possible. My queen, I want to welcome you to Brave Voices. Tell us a little bit more about who you are and how's your heart today?
Wow, thank you, Craig. I am, like you said, Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall, and my heart's good today. I just came off a self-imposed week of rest and reflection, and my journey to education is definitely non-linear. Most folks go to college for education who are in the field, in the profession. I went to college to study psychology, and I was going to be a retailer. I was going to be on fashion shows and sitting
What?
in Paris. Oh, yeah. I worked for Saks Fifth Avenue. I worked for Bendel's in New York. I worked for Macy's. So I worked for some well-known places. And when I was in the buying office at Saks Fifth Avenue, we were doing a Chanel handbag buy. Chanel handbag buying at the time, I was one of the assistant buyers. And at the time, they had a very, very particular way of doing business. You had to be in your seat within 5 minutes of your buy time. You had to have a Polaroid camera. So now you know how old I am. And you had to be able to turn around your purchase orders within 24 hours. Each store had to have its own purchase order. You couldn't give them ship dates. And if you did not turn around your orders within the specified time, they would automatically be canceled. Getting ready for this buy, my buyer at the time was deathly asthmatic. We took about 2-3 weeks to get prepared, all of our open to buying, our selling. She pulled an all-nighter to get the purchase orders to Chanel on time. And I had been working for a week, 12-hour days, getting there, getting home really late. I got in the next morning and she had spent the night working there. Now, she had family, kids. Nobody at that time told her, don't do that. No one said, don't ever do that. They all said, did you know so-and-so pulled an all-nighter? And it was at that moment where I said, I'm never going to do that. I didn't pull an all-nighter in college. In all of my collegiate years, I didn't pull an all-nighter. I didn't do an all-nighter until I was earning my doctorate. And I was well into my 50s. I turned 50 when I went to earn doctorate and hadn't gotten a master's, gotten an undergrad, didn't do any all-nighters. And I said, I'm not going to do that.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was dating my husband, who was my husband now, but wasn't then. We were running a tutoring program. And I just decided, a really dear friend of ours who turned out to be our daughter's godmother said, "You should go into teaching." I was like, "Really? Don't know." And that's how I ended up in teaching. I
Hmm.
started out running a tutoring program.
Hmm.
And then I did Title I teaching at first, and I did elementary, and I ended up in middle school, New Jersey and North Carolina. And then when we moved out of North Carolina into Virginia, I
Hmm.
didn't want to work in the district anymore. I got tired of what that felt like. I needed
Hmm.
some space to think about what was new and possible. And after earning my doctorate, I ended up at a educational nonprofit think tank called Ed Trust in the DC area, and
Hmm.
then did that for about 7 years. And now I'm on my own,
Hmm.
leading liaison educational partners, where we really do work with states, districts, and schools and other educational facing entities to make sure young people have the leaders and the educators with the skills, with the
Hmm.
knowledge and the mindset
Yeah.
equipped to ensure they have and receive the excellent education they deserve. We truly
Hmm.
believe every kid deserves an excellent education. And we look at curriculum, we look at instruction, and we look at the culture. Any one of those three that are out of balance,
Hmm.
and that doesn't work. So you've got to have that trifecta clearly, operationally,
Hmm.
mindset, structurally in place in ways that serve kids
Yes.
first. And that's what we work on.
Hmm. You also help us to really re examine what power looks like in our own bodies, as well as how that shows up in classrooms, in hallways, in conference rooms, in in a host of different settings. And right now, in the current environment, there may be folks who feel powerless. And, I was talking to one of our great colleagues, Dr. Keisha Chandler from ASCD, a little earlier. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were having a conversation about how power situates itself, and some folks taking their power to take a seat and take a break, and actually just sit and take care of themselves, take care of their loved ones. But I know that you are also standing with so many folks in classrooms, in schools, in districts, and having conversations about power, instructional power specifically. I'm curious, for those who may feel powerless right now, could you share a little bit more about, maybe a conversation or an engagement you've had with someone lately in the work that you're doing, and how that, how are they navigating, or how are you helping them to navigate these situations that make them feel like they're powerless?
Thank you for that question. Before I answer it, I want
Hmm.
to help your listeners understand what you mean when you say instructional power and where you got it from. And
Yes.
for me, that's based upon my book,
Yes.
Understand Your Instructional Power. I got to that idea because I was looking first and foremost at myself and
Mm.
how my decisions were impacting the young people that I have the privilege to help learn.
Yes.
And my power came down to how I understood the dynamic between adult and kid. And
Hmm.
I came from a very traditional background where adults tell kids what to do, and
Hmm.
adults are in control of what kids do. And it wasn't until I began to really reflect on how that mentality was creating harm in my classroom did I begin to ask some different questions. And so instructional power comes down to the adults in buildings, in classrooms, in districts and states really using their authority based upon role to
Hmm.
shape how young people experience the learning environment.
Hmm.
And they can do it in such a way that fosters agency development and
Hmm.
empowerment, or they can do it in such a way that protects their positionality and
Hmm.
their ownership mechanisms and creates disenfranchisement.
Hmm.
Right now, a lot of people are feeling as though, as the adult, they don't have the environments they're in are being power protected,
Hmm.
creating disenfranchisement for them. If you aren't careful and realizing how you yourself internalize power, you're going to take what's happening to you and automatically shift it to others.
Yes.
What I am asking people to do is stop for a moment and think clearly and reflectively about how they learned about power. How did you
Hmm.
learn about it? So if I say, Craig, how did you learn about power? You're likely to say at home through a series of actions,
Yes.
right? right? You got to look. Sometimes it was very silent.
Hmm.
Right?
I knew what my mother was saying without saying a word.
Right? And then you learned another level of it when you
Hmm.
go into other social environments. So at school, you learned
Yeah.
about power at school because you had teachers, you had principals that were directing your actual resources and your access to actual learning. You
Hmm.
may have been in a club. That's another dynamic. You may have been in a church, another dynamic. You may have been in a community center environment, right?
Hmm.
Boys and girls club, any sports, whatever,
Yeah.
right? Each of those environments comes with a set of cultural norms
Hmm.
based upon a dynamic of relational power. You
Yes.
cannot get away from it,
Mhm.
right? Even though we pretend that in education, we don't handle that because education is pristine and there are no such things as power in
Hmm.
education, primarily because it is difficult to imagine the idea of a place we consider to be so nurturing, to be imbued with the social dynamics of power. The social dynamics of power are at work with any relationship. Even if a teacher is working towards agency development and empowerment, the dynamic of children will automatically take place. And so what I try to help people think about is, where are you in your power journey? One,
Hmm.
do you even know that you've got one? Do you
Hmm.
recognize that you are making decisions not just about your culture? Your culture has a power dynamic imbued in it.
Hmm.
Do you even know yours?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're going to be creating inadvertent harm. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of the work I want people to really take some time and think through is, how do you really understand your own power center? And
Hmm.
how is your power center impacting your pedagogical principles
Yeah.
and your pedagogical practices? And that doesn't just mean classroom, because as
Yeah.
a leader, you have pedagogical practices and
Yeah.
you've got pedagogical principles.
That's powerful. It's not a but. And what I think about when I situate myself back in the seat of being a teacher and being a school leader, and I'm working with some school leaders, and some educators, but mostly school leaders right now, who are aware of where they lie within a hierarchy, and many are aware that they have influence on the young people who are in a classroom, the community that they reside in or work in. And for school leaders, just knowing the entire community, for them always is like on their back. And I think about that as being a former superintendent, head of school and whatnot. And when we talk about power in such a context, which is very broad, I feel like you have to do the interrogate. Like, I had to do the light and shadow work for myself throughout my teaching and principal journey, in order for me to actualize that shared leadership model that we talk about at Harvard, or enter institution here. You can do that work with young people in a way that's absolutely igniting for them to know they not only have they are empowered by what we're learning and what we're seeing and what kind of activities we have. If you feel like you want to really empower student voice and agency, as you name, but you also give them an opportunity to center their experiences and then figure out, through inquiry, through project-based learning, through culturally responsive pedagogy and practice and more, that we're shaping an experience so that they are continuing to grow and be nurtured as global citizens. Our current work today is for young people. Like, I'm hoping that we're thinking about this is, our young people, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, are looking at us. They're looking at how are we responding and reacting in this environment.
Yep.
They're looking to see where, if we're being silent, are we naming a thing as a thing? Are we anxious? Are we fearful? Are we silent? All of that is, centered on this pseudo of what power may look like based on the administration that we're in. The presidential administration that we're presiding, in right now. And so what I'm hearing you say is that regardless of the dynamics that are in play, there's still an opportunity for an individual who is a teacher, a school leader, a district leader to really have conversations around power and also unpack that work so that ultimately the young person thrives. They will win because they not only understand it, but they also understand the positionality and privilege that comes with it. Can you help me and some of our listeners just do some work to better understand? I attended one of your wonderful sessions, and I had a great conversation with a wonderful educator, a sister in Alabama, who talked
Mhm.
about shaping literacy and navigating the new legal policies on that. I think now mean that if a third grader doesn't read on grade level, they are going to be held back. And that's definitely a principle that happened in New Orleans, Louisiana, or actually
How did it
Louisiana
work out
State.
for them? How did it work out for them? So how did it
Yeah.
work out for them?
Yeah, that it's a
Yeah.
great question. But I'm
Uh-huh.
like, many times though, the people who were held back are Black and brown young people, immigrant students. And so I'm curious on, as you're having these conversations, as folks are really trying to rethink and re-examine, reimagine the triple P experience, could you share a little bit more about, whether or not it was during the lives, whether or not it's been in some of the work you're doing with some of the partners that you have, where might they be anxious, and where are you seeing some glimmers of hope through your coaching, through your training with folks who are navigating this power dynamic?
Yeah. So two things. Number one, on the curriculum side, right? So you
Hmm.
mentioned literacy and you mentioned being in one of my sessions where we talked about that.
Hmm.
I look at curriculum through the lens of being representationally balanced.
Hmm.
How are people, cultures, and topics on the page?
Hmm.
A lot of times we are focused on whether they are there or not,
Yeah.
right? So whether they have brown faces, boys, different cultures, whether they are there. And
Hmm.
that's important because they need to be there.
Yeah.
But if they're there in pejorative ways,
Hmm.
don't put them there.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the balance I seek to push people to look at is how are they there?
Hmm.
How who is getting the opportunity from the character development side to be agentic in
Hmm.
their representation? How are cultures in relationship with one another? What kinds of topics are being presented and how? And the power comes from one of my clients now is really equipping their eyes and ears.
Hmm.
So now that all the toothpaste is out of the tube, they can't put it back.
Yes.
So every single time they begin to pull together a sort of unit of study,
Hmm.
right? A batch of study, batch of materials with multiple texts and things like that, they're going to hear my voice in their head. And
Okay.
they're going to look at a page and they're going to know Dr. Marshall is going to have something to say when we give this to her.
Hmm.
Because the person who's in the wheelchair is going to be in the back of is going to be at the back of the image. The
Hmm.
language between boys and girls is going to show a dynamic of girls not having agency. The
Hmm.
relationship between different cultures is going to definitely continue stereotypical imbalances between culturally privileged groups and those who are not. So that's one side. Thinking about it from the other side, you have to have instruction and culture that takes that kind of curriculum and
Hmm.
filters it down into practice.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a building and I'm looking at a teacher, right, if I'm doing a walkthrough with a leader and
Hmm.
I'm watching who the leader in the classroom is privileging by way of who is talking,
Yes.
I'm going to ask the question about who do you see learning and who don't you see learning.
Hmm.
I'm going to ask the question about the posters on the wall and what message is being caught by the silent things on the wall while you're talking.
Yes.
Because if the two are not in alignment, there's a mismatch between what you're saying and
Hmm.
what the kids are seeing around them. So, for instance, I was in a building about 2 years ago, and this woman was in a very, very power protecting space. And one of the posters on her wall, it was right on her wall, her desk,
Hmm.
said, "Does this look like your space?"
Hmm.
I was like, "Ma'am, uh, and I get it. She wanted the young people to know that you have your space and I've got my space.
Hmm.
But there's a way to say that without it being snarky.
Yes.
And a lot of times, adults don't recognize that young people don't get sarcasm until later in life,
Yeah.
because there's a certain amount of language and intonation
Yes.
that goes along with sarcasm that young people miss,
Yeah.
unless you've grown up in a home where you see linguistic dexterity to such a degree that the adults and the kids operate that way. But if you don't, and the subtleties of sarcasm get missed,
Yes.
and young people don't know that, the brain doesn't always catch it. So that use of sarcasm, and I'm looking at leaders too who also do the same thing. I had a group of a school in North Carolina do a book study, and the principal said after reading the book, she can walk into a meeting and clearly recognize where power protecting is happening. And name it. And she even said, I'm even doing that with my boyfriend. She's like, yeah, I'm actually seeing this power protecting. I said, ma'am, don't put my name in that. That was going too far, going too far. But the idea that we have to, if we want young people to be what we say we want them to be,
yes,
the adults must then own so many parts of themselves before we can make a child do the same thing. Yeah. And far too often we go straight to the kid and we don't start with the adult. And so my work on power is about, don't talk to me about kids, not yet, because you're going too far too fast. If your conversation about power begins with kids, your conversation about power must begin with you, because you, at the end of the day, have ascribed authority where you really, really can direct the access to a child's learning versus another child. You really can, from amount of wait time to who you call on to where you seat kids, all of that. Yes. Those are real power moves that happen in real places. Even where a leader puts a teacher. Yes. Right. There are leaders who, when they're shuffling around, I've seen it happen when they're shuffling around teachers and buildings. Yes. They like a certain one. They don't like a certain one. So they'll put one in one part of the building when they know it's dirty and dusty and all those things. And they'll put a more favored one in a much more, beneficial space. So all of those dynamics come into play, and they are filters for decisions.
That has me also think about not just the adults who are serving in classrooms, but also our children's first teachers, our parents. And so I'm curious with this work, for parents who may be listening right now to this conversation and are really trying to think about their privilege, their positionality, their power, right? Again, there are systems that are designed that they have to interface with, that they have to navigate. And so when it comes down to instructional power and just the 3 Ps, what are some of the conversations you may be having or are having with parents or with school leaders about parent engagement and how parents are part of this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first question I always ask is, do you want participation or do you want involvement? Because I can participate without being involved, right? Participation is, I can sign my notes. I can sign the notebook home that he asked me to sign. I can show up but if you want me involved, that's a different thing. And the question comes down to those two things. Which parents does your structure privilege participation and involvement? Which ones favor those parents who are able to be actively involved?
Yes.
And if there's a mismatch between the two, you need to go back and ask yourself another set of questions. What do you gain as the leader by the group of people who are not actively involved? We always ask, what do you gain by them being involved? There's something you gain by them not being involved.
Yeah.
And so what do you gain by the group of parents for whom participation is all you really, really want? I want people to ask themselves real questions, not the supposed to ask questions, but the real questions. Do we really want every parent of our children in the building, in the district, in the classroom involved? The answer is no. Yeah. So when we come to the realization that our answer to that question is no, then we can get on to the business of doing the stuff. Yeah. But we keep pretending that we want a thing that we don't really want. And we're like, well, why aren't we getting the thing we say we want? Because your structures mirror what you actually want, not what you say you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my thing is, reorient yourself. And if you truly do want participate, like active involvement, look at your structures, actively look at, and there's been a lot of work on that. There has been a lot of work. There's been a lot of really great work where school districts have made, they change times, right? They change dates. They give morning and they give afternoon. They really try to give a lot of information. They have parent portals and, text messages that go out. There's been a lot of effort in getting to parents across multiple avenues and venues. And so I would say there has been a critical shift in that area for knowledge dispensing.
Yes.
You want to give parents knowledge and information about their kid. Do you want the parents actively involved in the running of the building? That's a different level. And the power dynamic in that is so real.
Yeah.
I was reading an article from the educational researcher from AERA. And there was an article in there about this idea of continuous improvement. And it was really around the power dynamic infused in those people who go into schools working on continuous improvement, right? They go in, and I will say, so I liken it to another organization that sends in teachers for a 2-year stint and they shuffle them out because, they could train them over the summer. They send them in, and those teachers are there to miraculously fix all the broken places and make it all better because they know best about the environment they're sending people in. When there is a doing to, as opposed to cooperating with, there's an automatic power shift that's imbalanced, favoring a more privileged group. And it's really important to understand that when you are going into an already existing environment, your job is to shut your whole mouth and listen. Level and the power dynamic is such that you want to privilege the people who are already there first. You want to go in through a level of respect. You want to go in as a knowledge gatherer as opposed to a knowledge dispenser. And a lot of times, it happens to parents. We like to be knowledge dispensers. We actually don't trust parents the way that we say we do. We trust certain parents, but we don't trust all parents. And some shouldn't be trusted. Like, let's be clear. Like, there are some parents who should not be trusted. No joke. Like, got that. I don't mean that. I mean, by and large, societally, we privilege certain parents over others. And so that power shift, that power imbalance is going to be very, very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing to and doing with. Is that what you said?
Doing to and cooperating with. Right. You do to people when you are in a place of the belief system that you know best. You cooperate with when you are of the belief system that you both know together.
Yes. I'm really still thinking about the leader you talked about who had the sign that says, like, this is my space. And I'm paraphrasing that. And I'm putting back on my school leader hat. And what I know now that I didn't know my first year as a principal, first year as a school leader, was that I am coexisting with other folks, and there's always a shared power dynamic. Because at any point, and I learned this as a teacher, students could be like, I'm just not doing it. I don't care. I don't do it. I'll take the consequence. Fine. What are you going to do about it? And I was that kid. So I recognize that energy. And so what I had to start doing and reworking in my brain was that I joined a community that already existed, had its own values and vision and people who are all connected and interconnected into the space. And there's value in everyone who is there, regardless of whether or not you believe or, if you may have differing views and beliefs and perspectives. You may get information that is shared with you that makes you question and pause. There are folks who'll be like, don't talk to that one or these people over here because they're . And you have to center yourself on, okay, I am going to digest and take in everything that comes. And for me as a first year leader, I wanted to hear from the young people and like, why do you keep coming here? Many of them like, because this is the school that my parents signed me up for, so I'm here. I don't have a choice in the matter. I'm here, right? So you have young people who are already situated that they're in a place that they didn't sign up for, but they're here. And, hopefully they're having a good experience. But then you have teachers and educators, depending on the system you're in, who are also there, some who were there before, and those who join you when you are at that place of intersection. And I think about my parents, I think about my community partners, like all that I inherited as being part of this now new family that,
Mhm.
now I'm joining. I have an opportunity to garner some perspective. For the first 2 years, I failed miserably at being a leader because
Don't we
I,
all? Like,
yeah,
don't we all?
yes, but I
Yeah.
failed at realizing everything I just shared with you because I thought, because no one talks about this when you are signing your contract and you're going to the orientation. No one talks to you like as a human about, okay, we have now named you as a master teacher, if you will, or operator for this space that is going to now be engaged in human work, heart-centered work that's going to stretch you, frustrate you, and you're working in a system that may or may not, that may disadvantage or create advantages for certain groups and people and schools and things. And you have to figure out how you're going to navigate that. And you have to be public facing in front of everyone to process, reflect, make quick decisions on behalf of young people you serve with whatever you have. I know for me as a first and second year school leader, I understood that I was walking into a school community that was supposed to be closed. The state was supposed to come and shut it down because this academics was what it was.
Hmm.
I'm from the South. I'm a fighter. I'm scrappy. I'm like, well, you're not gonna hire me, black man, 6'3", 200 plus pounds, coming into a school that you're gonna close. Like, I didn't come here to
Right.
like I,
Right.
I would love to call myself Kendrick Lamar and talk about my DNA, be it having a power in my DNA, but I didn't come here so y'all could close this place down. We're going to
Right.
show you something better than you know. What I found was my power, or where I gained power, was through relationships where people made a decision to build a relationship with me and were willing to be active listeners to some of the ideas and things I was thinking about, be of counsel to me and it didn't matter what your position was. But I'm like, if you're willing to engage with me, I then found out if you're willing to offer counsel, if you as a parent are saying, look, I can't, I have to drop my kid off and I have to make sure they get picked up. But one of the things I can do is if you need snacks for a situation, I can get snacks. Or I have one Friday out of the week where I can come and volunteer. I can come in for an hour and do that thing for you. You just got to let me know in advance. And
Hmm.
knowing if they too wanted to be part of a winning community, something that thrives, something they could be proud of. No parent ever wants to be in an environment where their kids are suffering. They're in an environment where they're in a cycle where they also their kids are going through the same cycle they went through as parents, and they don't want to be hurt, they don't want to be damaged, they don't want to be traumatized. They want to know that they can trust the young people to the adults in the space who also see them as amazing and genius and growing and have capital.
That's right. 100%. Power, it is interesting. It is very interesting that the entire system of the education works
Mm-hmm.
because the end user,
Mm-hmm.
which is the child, has the least input
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
And it is actually, this dynamic is actually a consensual dynamic
Hmm.
where we as a parent, and I've
Right.
had two kids go through elementary all the way through, you consent to hand your child over to other people, and the child has the least amount of say so,
Yeah.
but the one teaching them also has not as much say so as we think, right? Because they don't determine who they get
Yes.
in that sense, right? They don't
Mm-hmm.
determine that. But they both consent to the dynamic itself
Mm-hmm.
inherently, which is another reason why we don't talk about it.
Hmm.
It's understood.
Yes.
And because it is understood, we don't bring it to the forefront. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it is a very real social theory
Mm-hmm.
that that sort of flows through the entire process. And so the parent is giving their child over, and we are trusting, you said a really important word, we are trusting the process,
Yes.
which is why we get so pissed off when it doesn't work, because
Yes.
we have put our trust in that process,
Yes.
which is another reason why we've got to have this personal. If I had my druthers, every single school of education across this country would have this book,
Yes.
because it helps the teacher before they walk in the door. And there would be book studies at the leader level, because you are a leader and this is going on in your building
Yes.
and in your district and in your state. It's happening. And the idea that we want there to be a relationship, you said it. It was in the relationship.
Yeah.
It was in the trust. It was in the willingness to recognize you were failing at first. Something bad was happening. There was harm happening.
Yes.
Harm could have still been going on if you had not been reflective.
Right.
Think about all the places and spaces where harm is going on right now, because a person in a position, the POWER, power, it means position, ownership, work, environment, and the relationships, that the PO and the R are off. So when the position and the ownership and the relationships are off, the work and the environment will be imbalanced.
Yeah.
And so just think about how many environments are out of balance because of that. How many young people, particularly young people who literally look like you and me from a physical standpoint, meaning male and female, and then from a racial standpoint, we're African American people, right? How many of kids that look like us are in places and spaces where the dynamic is off, where a person's position and their view and how they own the environment and how they dispense the work is negatively impacted by the relationships. I offer a power questionnaire for leaders to really think through the power dynamic in their buildings. How are you understanding, and how is you and your leadership team really looking through this POWER lens? And it's pretty fascinating. It's not people will think, it's definitely something that forces folks to consider, what are the positional factors at work? How is the ownership seen? How is work dispensed? What are the environmental qualities going on, right? And we also do work on student agency, because what we call student agency right now is really managed choice. Adults are managing the choices of kids and calling it agency.
Yes.
There are times when you must manage choices, 100%, 100%, not all the time.
Yeah.
And if the only time a young person is doing something that they want, close to what they want, is because the adult gave them, a bingo board and the bingo board had the choices on it. If that's the only way choices are made, that is not agency. That is managed choice.
Yeah.
And that is something, we're seeing that people love to call it agency. It is not. And I want student voice. No, you don't. Because let me tell you, students going to practice their voice development in the place closest to them.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And I ask people, are you really ready for Johnny to tell you about yourself? No, you're not. But that is where agency development will begin. It's going to begin in the place closest to them, classroom, the building, and then it'll go out from there. So yeah, those are the sort of structures I would push leaders to think about. Think about the power dynamics, the POWER. Think about student agency from a structural perspective. Is it part of a strategic plan? Is it really part of your strategic plan? Does every single adult in your building have the same definition of student agency, what it looks like, what it sounds like, operationally? The answer is no. It's no. It's no. And are you providing professional development to ensure that when students, particularly those in like the fifth-ish grade above, start walking in their naturally occurring need to become, and in that becoming, they will start exercising agency.
Yeah.
And if you and your leaders and all of the other educators around the building are not prepared for that, don't understand the psychology and the development behind that, you're going to have clashes. And the clashes are going to show up when you punish kids. And you're going to see disparities, which we see
Yeah.
in punishment. I am no longer calling it discipline because I got a whole different conversation about that. Punishment,
Mm-hmm.
because it is putting kids back into the position we want them to be in,
Mm-hmm.
because the way we understand the relationship between adults and kids is filtered through a lens of our own personal power, pedagogical, there are pedagogical practices and principles.
So much to take from all of that. I am looking at me as a second year school leader who didn't have this education that you're sharing with us today. If I'm a teacher, a school leader, district leader, community leader, nonprofit leader who's adjacent to the youth survey work, a parent, if they're listening today and they're standing at a crossroads, they hear you. Part of this is about vulnerability, right? Putting yourself out there in the public square to say, I don't know, or I didn't know that I was doing that. I didn't know that I was actually oppressing folks. I didn't know that I was harming others because of my pride, my ego. And I'm feeling uncertain and I'm questioning, okay, well, what do I do next? What would be one brave step you tell them to take after hearing our conversation today?
Honestly, get the book.
Okay.
And the reason why I would say get the book is because you will get technical language and steps to move forward. There are real strategic moves there. And the other thing I would say is call me.
All right.
Book a call with me. I'd love to chat with you to talk more about where this is showing up. One of the critical questions I ask people is this: what are you gaining by remaining in a place you know is harmful? And the first thing people say, meaning harmful to others, right? The first thing they say is, I'm not gaining anything. I'm like, yeah, you are. You're gaining something. Because once you recognize that what you're doing is stagnating somebody else's progress, and that can be progress in a fifth grader learning how to read,
Yeah.
but because you're stuck on your belief between this type of reading and that type of reading, Johnny ain't gonna never read.
Mm-hmm.
It maybe it's that,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it is, a ninth grader stuck in algebra because you refuse to change your math perspective. So the kids are going to hate math because you believe math has to be taught a certain way. Maybe it's that. Maybe it is you are an assistant principal
Mm-hmm.
and you have decided that this is your proving ground to become a principal, and it is. So you're going to take this hard line,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be, hard line, and you're going to make them do what you say, all those things. That might be you are gaining something by remaining in that mental space. You got to answer that question. What are you gaining? What are you really gaining by staying in that space? I would say get the book, because understanding the principles behind it. A lot of times we look for what can I do right now? What can I do right now to change this? Right now, what you can do is get the book,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to do some additional learning.
Mm-hmm.
In education, we are all about doing,
Mm-hmm.
because we're problem solvers,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
We're problem solvers. So we are all about action. That's the action, because you need to learn some things first. Then you can take the right kind of action to get the long lasting shifts that are necessary to move forward. That's what I would say.
Okay. So y'all heard it first. Get the book. And so how can folks stay connected to you in the work? How would they be able to experience, your incredible genius as well as what you may offer to folks who are wanting to do this deep work that it is not necessarily just a shot in the arm. You do it for, 5 months and you're done. Like, how would people stay connected with you to continue this work?
Yeah, first things first, go to our website. Our website is liaisoneducationalpartners.org.
Mm-hmm.
Liaison is LIAI SON, educationalpartners.org on our website. I do a weekly live every Thursday at noon
Mm-hmm.
called Let's Talk Power Live. I'm on my YouTube channel. So I invite you all out there to please join us every Thursday at noon to 30 minutes, and we talk about power and education. We talk about curriculum. I just came off a series about testing. Right? We
Mhm.
are in assessment time.
Yes.
And one of the things I talk about is your test prep isn't working.
Hmm.
And I did a whole, 4 weeks on why test prepping is what it is, why it doesn't work. And then, so website, join our Let's Talk Power Live every Thursday. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tanji Reed Marshall on LinkedIn. I'm right there. And when you go to our website, would love to have you join our email list because that's going to be your first line of information.
Hmm.
We have our monthly newsletter. You'll get information about upcoming webinars, any kind of courses. We're going to be releasing a whole series of summer learning coming up. Now, heard it first?
All right. All right.
Right, yeah,
All right.
releasing right here,
Get a
and
little
I'll be letting you
teaser.
know.
Okay.
That's right, yeah. Summer learning, where we're taking our Let's Talk Power Live and releasing it on as a course for folks to really begin their own journey. I think it's important. I don't think I know it's important for people to be on this journey. Get
Yeah.
on this journey and actually create the environments that we say we want. And it filters through your lens of power.
Yeah.
Your pedagogical principles and your pedagogical practices are filtered through the lens of
All right, y'all. So you got to get signed up for the summer work. You got to get the book. Don't just get one. You got to get multiple because you should do this in
well.
community.
And here's what happens if you do I say, what do I do? Oh, if you do a set of 30 books,
Mm-hmm.
I do a free author book study.
Nice. Okay. That's
So if
what's
you're out
up.
there and you want to do a book study, 30 books, order them. You can order them from us on our website, or you
Yes.
can order them in another way. I will do a free 1 hour author talk.
Oh, that's what's up. So I'm gonna make sure I put all this information in the show notes and
Please do.
whatnot. So y'all go ahead and get y'all better go ahead now. Get I know that Dr. Reed Marshall gets booked quite quickly. So y'all better take care and get that. Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Reed Marshall, for being a guest today on Brave Voices in Education. This has been pretty awesome. I will have to, make sure I follow up with a part B, a part two, because we didn't get to do our game because we run out of time today. But this has been this has really tugged at my heart, and I am hopeful that this also gives people a cup of courage to not only do the work that you've laid out before us, but also that they actively pick up the book, not just to pick it up to say, I have another book on my shelf, but to also really do the work in community with you and others who are really dedicated to the children that we serve.
Absolutely. It has been a pleasure to join you today. So thank you for having me.
So this is why I love doing these conversations, everybody. Leadership is one thing, but life is where we really get tested. I actually am hearted. If today's episode spoke to you, share this cup of courage with your people, your staff, your village. And if you're ready to go deeper into this work of leading with courage and care, DM us, Brave Voices, and we will make sure we get you a gift to a link. We will actually give you a link to a free gift from us, as well as all of this wonderful information from Dr. Reed Marshall. And we may also invite you to join our Fall 2025 Brave Leadership Accelerator. Until next time, we want you to love your boldness, love being whole, love your brave, love being you. I'll catch y'all soon on the next one. Y'all take care.